Oh, blissful morning, when with our Savior.
Well, good evening. Welcome to Grover Hill Zion United Methodist Churches and Thursday evening devotions from around the kitchen table, where we've been talking about some of the great hymns of the church and the stories behind why they were written and perhaps why they're meaningful to us and as well. But the great hymns of the church, they bring comfort to us in all kinds of ways, and sometimes they help us rejoice. They just speak to us in many ways. Perhaps perhaps you can hear something playing in the background. It's sung by Marilyn Sellers. The title of this song is called Beyond the Sunset. Beautiful song. When I was a child, even, I loved that song. We used to sing it in church. For me, and even today, I use it for meditation. But for many, it was used in funerals as well, just as it's a song of hope. It was written by, Beyond the Sunset was written by a man by the name of Virgil Brock in 1936. He was a minister in the Christian church, and he ministered, wrote a lot of music. He was connected with a conservative evangelical community over at Winona Lake in Indiana. You know, this whole area here, Winona Lake and all over Ohio and southern Indiana and around, a lot of famous gospel groups have come out of there. Even the Cathedral Quartet, they're not in existence any longer. They're all gone, most of them. But they used to sing at WOWO in Fort Wayne on the radio back in the 50s and before. Just a great group. Well, anyway, the origin of this song is just, by the way, these are the author's description of it, and I've abridged it so that hopefully it doesn't seem like it's too long until you've chopped a lot of it out, but it's his testimony as to why he wrote this song. And so, since it's so well documented, I'm just going to use his words as to why he wrote it. This song, Beyond the Sunset, was born during a conversation at a dinner table one evening in 1936. Said they had been watching a very unusual sunset at Winona Lake in Indiana, and they were with a blind guest, his cousin, a man by the name of Horace Burr, and his wife Grace. It was a large area of the water. It appeared like it was on fire with the glory of God, and yet there were some threatening storm clouds that were gathering overhead. And his blind guest became excited, and he remarked, "I've just never seen such a beautiful sunset like this." And Brock said, he said, "You know, people are always amazed, Horace, when you talk like that, when you talk about seeing." And Horace said, "Well, I can see. I see through other people's eyes, and I think I can see more clearly because I can see beyond the sunset." Isn't that remarkable? Most of us can't even see beyond our nose. But here's a blind man that says he could see beyond the sunset. But Brock said that beyond the sunset phrase that Horace spoke, and the inflection of his voice just struck him very forcibly, and so he began singing a few measures. And his wife said, "That's beautiful." And she said, "Virgil, please go to the piano and sing that phrase again." And so he went to the piano and soon completed the first verse. And then his guest urged him that he should continue to try another verse about the storm clouds that were gathering around the glory of God. And the words for this verse, Brock said, came very quickly as well, recalling how for so many years that our guest had to walk hand in hand. Horace and his wife Grace had to walk hand in hand due to Horace's blindness. So he said the third verse was added very soon. Before the evening meal was finished, all 4 stanzas had been written, and they sang the entire song together. The author's attention to the beauty of nature, his empathy for the positive example set by the birds in the face of the hardships that they were enduring, and his quick ear for a profound and arresting turn of phrase gave us this song that has been a source of comfort to untold numbers, millions of people since it was written. Though it is an appropriate meditation hymn for any time, and as I said a moment ago, that it is for me, that's what I use it for. It, of course, has been a traditional favorite at funeral services for many years as well. You know, it's a hymn of hope. It's a promise that this isn't the end, that we will claim the promises of God and we'll see our loved ones once again. Now the sunset, of course, has long been associated with the end of life. Jesus used this image in John's Gospel, chapter 9, verse 4. We must work the works of him who sent me while it's still day. Night is coming when no one can work. That's what Jesus said. The writer of the Hebrews then warns us that the coming sunset of life, that it's coming soon. But then he continues, exhort one another every day. Share your love with others every day as long as it's called today. Hebrews chapter 3. If there is a sunset of life, Christianity certainly teaches that there is a new dawn beyond it. It's the end of one thing, but the beginning of another, infinitely more glorious. When the day dawns and the morning star rises in your hearts. Thinking on that eternal morning can also increase our determination and faithfulness as well. And then it talks about no storm clouds gathering or threatening us. Well, have you had a difficult night? A dangerous night, perhaps? Perhaps when you just long for the night to be over with, the night when you were afraid, and you prayed for the day to come. Perhaps you have. You know, I can remember some times when I've been out driving on the road at nighttime when you're in some unfamiliar territory or even in familiar territory, driving through storms, thunderstorms, a lot of rain. You can just barely see the road, no light, and when just the least bit of morning light then would make all the difference in the world. It would have a calming effect and be reassuring for us. Beyond the sunset. Though there are beautiful nights full of calm and restful contemplation, we have a natural presence for the day. See, at nighttime, predators of the four-legged and two-legged varieties stalk at night because darkness conceals their actions. And so we become apprehensive about the night, and because it does hold real dangers, it certainly can. But chapter 22, verse 5 in Revelations promises us heaven, that in heaven night will be no more. There will be no more darkness. There will be no more evil. Storms likewise are a source of fear in this life, aren't they? My neighbor years ago, every time a thunderstorm would come along, she would just panic and be filled up with anxiety, and she'd have to go someplace else where she could get out of her house and be in a bigger building and feel safe and secure. It just devastated her life to go through the storms of life. Well, the storms of this life, literal and figuratively, will someday be calmed forever by the same Lord who told the Sea of Galilee, "Peace, be still." Mark chapter 4, verse 39. Hold my hand. Hold my hand, the third verse says. And hold my hand and I'll guide you. Well, if you've ever had charge of a small child, you have said this more times than you can count. If you were a small child yourself, you heard it at least as many times. When the child is big enough to walk, but not big enough to make wise choices in where it goes, there's a long period where an adult's trusted hand is the lifeline of safety in a complicated world of unrecognized dangers. The psalmist frequently spoke of God's hand in the tender terms of a guiding parent. Psalm 73 verse 23. Nevertheless, I am continually with you. You hold my right hand, the Lord said. The hands of Jesus were the hands of love, protection, healing, and guidance. Jesus' hands touched the untouchable, as when the leper asked for healing. Jesus stretched out his hand and touched him, saying, "I will heal you. Be clean." And immediately his leprosy was cleansed. Matthew chapter 8. Jesus' hands reached out to save Peter when Peter tried to walk on the waters of Galilee, but then his faith failed. Jesus immediately reached out his hand and took hold of him in Matthew chapter 14. And then one of the most comforting and encouraging passages in Scriptures falls at the end of the 4th chapter of Thessalonians, Paul's letter to them. These good Christians living at the dawn of the gospel era expected the return of Christ at any moment. That's a great way for us to live as well. We were concerned that those who had preceded them in death would miss out on the glory of his coming. Paul unfolded a greater revelation of these mysteries. And he said, "I do not want you to be ignorant, brethren, concerning those who have fallen asleep, lest you sorrow as others who have no hope. For if we believe that Jesus died and rose again, even so God will bring with him those who sleep in Jesus. For this we say to you by the word of the Lord, that we who are alive and remain until the coming of the Lord will by no means precede those who are asleep. For the Lord himself will descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of an archangel, and with the trumpet of God. And the dead of Christ will rise first. Then we who are alive and remain will be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air. Let me just share with you the words of the 4th stanza. Beyond the sunset, oh glad reunion with our dear Lord, loved ones who've gone before. In that fair homeland we'll know no parting. Beyond the sunset, forevermore. Isn't that a beautiful hymn? I encourage you to do a YouTube search and look it up. Marilyn Sellers. And there are others as well. The Gaithers have an excellent version of it as well, with George Younce reading a poem. Well, have a great and blessed week, knowing beyond any doubt that you are loved.